Morning, everybody. Oh, big stretch. Hope you're all doing well. Oh, gross. Oh, no. Okay, can I show you something real quick? So my kids, so a little bit of context for this. We have 4 cats in the house right now. Normally we only have 2, and those 2 cats don't shed very much. I don't know why. But we're cat sitting, and so we have 2 more cats in the house, and they shed like crazy. And so my children have found it to be entertaining to go around the house and collect the fur that's fallen off of these cats and roll them up into balls and leave them places randomly. Just like random balls of cat fur for me to brush while I'm like finding my mouse at my desk. So there are several of those laying around right now. So that's how my life is going. Yeah, any thoughts, any questions, concerns? Not about the cat hair, although you could ask about the cat hair if you wanted, but about the paper for this week, or how the class is going in general, or the schedule. Okay. Yeah, I'm just going to assume everything is proceeding at pace then. I will send out an announcement about this next week, or for next week. I'll send it out, in the next couple of days. That we're not going to be doing any meetings next week because it's just an exam. Week 10, we have an exam every 5 weeks in this class, and ta-da! And so we have like an open book, take home ish, exam, just like we did a few weeks ago, if you can remember. I can barely remember that far back. So we're not doing any Zoom meetings next week. This will be the first of several weeks where we just won't be meeting, at least on Tuesdays. But I'll send out a reminder about that so you guys don't show up accidentally and no one's here. Okay, let's talk about the documents then for this week. And I think they're fairly self-explanatory, but I guess just so we're all on the same page and so you know what you're doing for the paper if you're still writing that. So this week's all about World War I. Really one of the most heartbreaking events in all of human history because it kills so many people. It maims and destroys the lives of millions more. But we get firsthand documentary evidence from a lot of the conflict just from ordinary people. By this point, ordinary folks, most of them have an education. There's such a thing as public education by World War I. So they know how to read and write. They can record. The average soldier can record his experiences in the conflict. You also get, records from non-combatants, journals, nurses, writing down their experiences and stuff like that. So we get like a just veritable mountain of firsthand evidence where we just see the emotional and psychological, not to mention the physical toll of a huge war on the lives of average people living in the West. And that's heartbreaking, right? That's sad for a lot of reasons. It's also sad that so many people did not expect this to happen. So many people thought that we were living in a more civilized time and culture than what we really were. And that's one of the questions I'm asking you in this paper is, based on the documents from this week and the last time, so I guess week 7 before spring break, what do these documents tell us about how people perceived civilization to be? We talked on Tuesday about how science has kind of changed. There's this optimistic inflection point in Western civilization that, hey, we're all like civilized now. We have X-rays and electrocardiograms and penicillin and stuff like that. But that same progress in technology and science has allowed us to craft terrible weapons of war, to divide one another into groups, based on social Darwinism, and it dehumanizes people. And so that's kind of what we're getting at, is like, is Western civilization really that civilized? And you can make an argument. There's no right or wrong way to answer that. It's just there's a lot of different angles to approach that, and that's what I want to see happen in this paper. You want to argue like, yeah, we were super civilized, go for it. But there's a few different angles to take in approaching this topic, and it's still something we're wrestling with today. So anyway, let's do these documents, and if you have any questions, we can get through those. Otherwise, I don't foresee us staying super long today, because I think they're pretty self-explanatory, these documents. So the first document set is the trench poets of World War I. Like I said, average soldiers have an education, they can read and they can write. The two documents that are kind of rolled into one, there's poems by Rupert Brooke and Wilfred Owen, who are both Englishmen fighting in the trenches of World War I. And they both have, they fancy themselves as kind of, like, I guess trying to psychologically process through the war, writing a poem about what they're experiencing firsthand. So I'm asking you guys this, what kinds of emotions or images are brought out in these poems? Any part, in other words, kind of what stood out to you guys as what these guys are writing about? Kind of images, emotions. Go ahead.
The way he describes like the gas and stuff, it's kind of very vivid. You almost feel like you're there experiencing it, and it seems very like terrifying and scared, especially when he like talks about the person like drowning in the gas and like basically like dying. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, good, Lindsay. Absolutely. It's like you said that, like, it's like you're experiencing it there firsthand, like, and that's probably the point that Wilfred Owen is he's trying to communicate to his audience, like, look, this is terrifying. Let me paint you a picture of the horror that I witnessed, so that people who maybe aren't there can understand just how bad this war is. Absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Page 898. So the second column, talking about the gas attack, and gas, poison gas or chemical gas is a brand new invention for this war. That first the Germans cooked up, and then the Allies also adopted it as well. And the horrible thing about gas is that it would like slowly asphyxiate you. It would attack the nervous system, and you would just slowly lose control of your body, your ability to breathe. It would attack the eyes first, and so if you even got a whiff of this gas, this mustard gas, a lot of soldiers would go blind first. If they got away, even if they got away from the gas, they didn't choke on it, they would be blinded. So you have lots of pictures from World War I of these soldiers just the blind leading the blind, like they have these bandages over their eyes because they got attacked by gas. Yeah, so it's horrifying. All right. Yeah, what else? So there's the gas attack, which is front and center. That's like, whew, yeah. What other kinds of emotions or scenes do we get from these poems?
So in the first one, it seems like he says the same stuff about England a lot. I don't know if he's just like wishing to see his homeland again.
Yeah, good, Jack. Yeah, Rupert Brooke seems to be a little bit more focused on the national politics of the war or something. Yeah, like sort of. So you're saying he's kind of evoking his homeland, kind of wishing to go back, or at least he knows. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine.
He knows why he's there fighting.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a very patriotic war, at least for the first few months. Like, people are really excited to go to war because they think, this is the kind of downside of nationalism, right? Is you think your country is the best, you think it deserves to dominate. Other countries, like that's nationalism, is like having this like extreme patriotism in one's country to the point where it excuses all manner of evils. So like England's ready to go to war, France is ready to go to war, Germany's ready to go to war. Like they're all excited about it, at least for the first few months. And then they get there and they realize, oh my God, like this is awful. And there's a lot of mixed emotions that come from that, because even though you're right, like Rupert Brooke is very much aware of like why he's there and what he's fighting for, he would probably rather not be there given the choice. Because it's a war and he's like watching his friends die, and you know he's probably had a few brushes himself. One of them does die. Yeah, Rupert Brooke dies in 1915, so a year into the war he dies. And the second one dies at the end of the war, the second trench poet. So this is, I mean, we're reading, you know, the firsthand accounts of people who are casualties of this conflict, and that's, yeah. Anything else stood out to you? There's the gas attack, the patriotism, the nationalism aspect of this.
On the first page, it's like on the first column, one of the last lines, it talks about how he thinks the world has grown cold, old, and weary. That kind of just like puts into place how maybe it's not so great as like everyone thinks it is, and they're not really that civilized.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, nice job at tying it into the writing prompt, Lindsay. That's good. Yeah. So there's this kind of, you know, only agony that has ending. The worst friend and enemy is but death. You know, there's a lot of just kind of brokenness, and the kind of cold reality of the world. Like, how could we allow ourselves? How could we, as the civilized Christian West, you know, who have, you know, such advanced things, allow ourselves to degenerate into this horrible base conflict? Yeah, good. So these are, you could take any number of snippets from these poems and kind of use it to justify what you're trying to argue in your paper one way or another. And, you know, they come at it from slightly different angles, but, you know, but I think this is what we're trying to get at here is, yeah, I don't need to beat that horse anymore. Any other comments or questions about the trench poems before we move on? I mean, it's really sad to read this stuff, you know, and I hate throwing depressing, you know, documents at you guys, and it's not going to get any better. As we talk about fascism, you know, the rise of like authoritarianism after this war, but it's all important. I mean, it's really important to read stuff that's happened to real people in the past, and with the knowledge that things like this it's not impossible that they could happen again. And so that's a sobering thought we should carry with us, whether we want to or not. Where it gets a little interesting is with the next document, Ernst Junger, Storm of Steel. We get the German perspective. Has anyone read, maybe, I don't think they necessarily assign this in public school anymore. Has anyone read All Quiet on the Western Front?
Yeah, when I was a junior in high school, we read it.
Okay.
When I was in freshman, I read it.
I just read it to read it.
Yeah, so did I, Jack. I just read it to read it because I grew up in Indiana. I went to school in Indiana, and they dropped All Quiet on the Western Front from the curriculum like the year before I was supposed to read it for whatever grade. And so I was like, I'm interested in history. I'll just read it to read it. And but it sounds like they still do assign it in schools, at least in Illinois. So that's good. That's good to know. So you guys are familiar with, you know, some of you are familiar with the story there. That there's the story of this young German dude who's like excited to go fight in the war, and because it's an adventure and it kind of breaks the humdrum of daily life. And he and his buddies go off to war, and kind of one by one they start to die around him. And all he wants to do is just go home. Storm of Steel is a lot like this. It's another German, and no matter like what, for some reason the Germans produced a lot of literature on like the heartbreaking nature of war on especially young men. But no matter what side you analyze, whether it's the British or the French or the Austrians or the Germans or the Italian, like whatever, everyone by the time we get to like a year into the war, everyone's like, what are we even doing here? This sucks. Can we just be done? And this, like the Ernst Junger is very much in this kind of vein of kind of German young men writing about their experiences. But he focuses on, just like All Quiet on the Western Front, which gives you a very vivid portrait of some certain aspects of trench warfare. This document also hovers on like a few details. So like he describes the British bombardment of the trenches. One of the terrible things about World War I is you could just die from like a artillery shell being lobbed onto your head, launched from a mile or more away. Like you don't even get to see the guy who's killing you, right? Because technology is advanced that much that you can launch shells miles into an opposing trench and just kill people. So it's a very impersonal aspect of war that's introduced, because now you don't need to be close enough to shoot someone. You can just die from something being, launched at you. So how does he describe the British bombardment on the trenches? How does it affect the psyche of the soldiers? In other words, like what's the psychological?
I mean, going from like kind of All Quiet on the Western Front, the way he described, just like the constant. I mean, it's like a terrific noise, just noise you could never imagine, and then the ground's literally shaking, and I mean, you don't know. You might get hit, you might not. It's like every time you hear a shell, it's like you got to come to terms. You might die, you might not.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Anything else you want to add to anyone else want to add to that? What's the psychological component of this?
It's probably very obviously traumatizing, and I don't know, like, remember what page it's on, but I just wrote the quote down. He talks about it as being a brutal, like, roaring sound, and he says the gigantic roaring of innumerable guns behind us was so atrocious that even the greatest of battles we had experienced seemed like a tea party in comparison.
Yeah. So the great roaring sound, the uncertainty of knowing what's going to happen from moment to moment. Anybody else want to comment on this?
Like shell shock, they would essentially just get shell shocked. Kind of like a PTSD, just what they considered like an early form of PTSD.
Yeah, good, Dylan. Yeah, you guys are all pointing towards the same thing, which is trauma, psychological trauma that results from this. They call
Don't forget, get trench foot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the different physical ailments that would come from staying in the trenches. But the psychological component is what Junger really focuses on, which is so powerful, because now we know, in the 21st century, a lot more about brain damage, about psychological trauma as a result of not even like concussions necessarily, although there is a lot of that too. But mental scarring that happens just from experiencing something, and we're learning more and more about that all the time. So this shell shock or PTSD, or however that term is going to evolve next, because we're still wrapping our arms around like the science of that. The World War I exposed so many people to the psychological trauma that we're now talking about all the time. And they had a very small vocabulary for it because they didn't quite understand it. But what Junger is focusing on with the bombardment of like being woken up at 4 a.m. by a roaring, like train-like sound that you don't know if you're going to die from 1 second to the next because you can't see. It's not like you can like track the shells or something in real time. You just have to sit tight and hope that you don't get blown up. This war goes on for 4 years like that. 4 years. Some soldiers have to experience that most days. And can you imagine having to walk away from that and try and be okay for the rest of your life, So, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that I want to sort of tease out here. One last question for you guys. You guys are killing it today. What does he mean at the end when he says, chivalry here took a final farewell? What do you think he's trying to say?
I feel like he's trying to say like nothing's like really good anymore. Like they're just not good in the world. They're not civil. They're not like respecting each other. They're just kind of just going out there and just killing each other.
Also, how they're Europeans now, they play like gentlemen's sports, like golf and polo, and they seem to be all civilized. Now they're in a trench, stabbing each other with their bare hands, and hand-to-hand combat, just brutality.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Yeah, chivalry, this old Western European idea. If you took Western Civ 1, we talk about the Middle Ages and like knights and jousting, and there's this kind of code of honor among the military class of society, that knights are supposed to behave in a very honorable way, towards one another in combat and pay each other respects in combat. And, this kind of continues on throughout like the colonial period. And, you don't execute prisoners of war because that would be uncivilized and not chivalrous and things like that. And then we get to this moment in the heart of Western civilization where people are killing each other from miles away, and you can't see the person who's killing you or trying to kill you. And and so it's this like Lindsay, I think I know where Lindsay's landing on the argument of like, is Western civilization really that civilized during this time? Because it just seems so insane. Like it seems just so insane that, they're like, we've bid farewell to these old days gone by where we can behave in a chivalrous way, even in combat towards each other. What are we doing? The very seams of society are ripping because technology basically makes it easy for me to, kill my opponent without even looking in their eyes first. And that does things to people. That does things to society. That makes us all less human towards each other. Well, good. Not to, this is depressing stuff, but it's like stuff that we're still wrestling. Like, like I remember during the Obama years where technology was getting to the point where like you could fly unmanned drones in combat zones, like the border of Pakistan and Afghanistan, and a lot of people died from drone strikes. And it's like, we're one more degree removed from this kind of chivalrous kind of like, the person, you can see the person who's trying to kill you. Now we have like robots flying the skies, dropping missiles. This is crazy. Like technology has made things so just insane. And there's a lot of criticism about that, rightfully so. So, these are all things I guess I want you guys to think about, and it sounds like you're spot on. My job here is done. To point out how terrible war is, I suppose, in the modern era. For the last 100 years, it's been really bad, like really, really bad. Okay, cool. Any other questions or comments about World War I or these documents or the paper?
For me, on my paper, I'm writing down what's on the book because I think that's a lot easier.
Okay, yeah, we can talk. Yeah, we can talk about that. Yeah, basically, I just just want you to make the argument. Just draw from these documents in any way that you want. Let's answer the questions and just cite where you're getting your information. So, yeah.
And for next week, can I use what PowerPoints are those? Can those be used? I mean,
Yeah, so I know it's been a while since we've done the last exam. So it's going to be, like multiple choice and true false questions to start out. And then for the essays, yeah, you can use PowerPoint from the classes, you can use the books, you can use any resources that we've talked about in class to answer the essay questions. And they're short essay questions. They're, they're not paper length. They're just like a couple paragraphs, or a couple, or even just like 2 to 3 sentences per question. That's fine. Yeah, good. All right. Well, you guys are awesome. Thanks so much for being here. I hope this helps at least frame things for the document, or for the paper. Sorry, frame the documents for the paper. If you have any questions, email me as always. Otherwise, enjoy your Friday. Have a great weekend. I'll send out an announcement about the exam. You can start working on it now if you want it. It's open to you. If you want to just knock it out, get it done this weekend, you are able to do so.
So when's the exam again?
It's next week. It's due by next Friday. And it's just open book, like it's, use all the resources you already have to answer the questions. You can go, you don't have to do it all at once. You can sit down and do a few questions and then leave and then come back to it. It's just due by the end of next Friday. Yep. All right. Well, thanks guys. You're awesome. Have a great weekend. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Hey, Professor.
Yes, Dylan.
I wanted to ask, have you ever heard of a YouTube channel called World War One?
No, I haven't.
It's kind of like a week by week basis that pretty much just covers each week of the war, and it goes into a lot of detail about pretty much everything that goes on, and it also handles a lot of like very like specific people that people want to hear about and stuff.
Okay.
And there's also another YouTube channel by the same guy called World War II, and they're pretty much doing the same thing about that. And they have like a really good segment that handles pretty much the cruelty from Nazi Germany and the other fascist states during World War II.
Nice. So,
Yeah.
So like the channel is just called.
Let me check really quick because it's been a while since I've watched that specific channel. It may be called. Okay, it's called The Great War, and the historian is Indy Nidell.
Okay, I'm gonna try and find it. Oh, I think I found it.
Yeah, it should just be like some guy in a vest staring at the staring at you.
Gotcha. Yeah, I see it.
Yeah,
that's cool. I'm gonna check that out because that is extreme. Like one of the things that hooked me and like brought me into the study of history was World War One, and so like I could get really deep into this stuff.
That was the same with me. It was actually, ironically, it was All Quiet on the Western Front that really got me into history.
Nice.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, thank you very much. I thought you would be interested in seeing that. So,
I am.
Have a good weekend.
And thank you. Yeah, you have a good one too. See you, Dylan. Cool.